Caitlin Clark has made some comments about a potential shootout. I think it was a terrible PR decision, judging by the response on social media.
You know, not to tattletale, but 0 members of Team Clark were very present for that.
Kelsey Plum is undoubtedly wishing Caitlin Clark had never spoken as she delivered the most vicious reaction in WNBA history. The entire league is in disbelief at Clark's 6-word Instagram message. You'll see why veterans are now afraid to meddle with the rookie sensation after hearing what she really said. You must first comprehend how Kelsey Plum committed the greatest error of her career before we unveil Clark's incredibly cruel comeback. The goal of the WNBA All-Star Game was to promote unity. Players fought for higher pay by donning "Pay Us What You Owe Us" shirts. Everything seemed perfect until Kelsey Plum decided to throw a grenade into the entire situation.
And she knew exactly, look, she knew exactly what she was doing. I've seen people try to explain this away.
Plum didn't merely make lighthearted remarks about team unity during the news conference following the game. She lost her mind. She notably criticized Caitlin Clark's team for their lack of dedication to the pay protest campaign.
It's a genuine surprise, but the t-shirt, just United Front, was determined this morning that we had a meeting for. And, you know, not to tattletale, but 0 members of Team Clark were very present for that.
This wasn't a casual comment. The most well-liked player in women's basketball was the target of a planned, methodical attack. This is what makes this completely crazy. Kelsey Plum has been working hard in the WNBA for years without having nearly the same influence as Clark, made the decision to openly challenge the dedication of the player who has contributed more money, attention, and fans to women's basketball than anyone in history. The arrogance is astounding. Even though Clark was hurt and unable to participate in the All-Star Game, Plum still felt that now was the ideal time for her to try. In essence, she accused Clark of not doing more to support player compensation. On the other hand, Clark is essentially the reason that WNBA income and viewership have surged.
Was attempting to have some trash talk there. She had taken a shot at Team Caitlin Clark and how much better Team Collier was earlier in the game.
The basketball community saw right through this pitiful act of envy. The fans were furious. Social media erupted with many pointing out Plum's blatant animosity and defending Clark. This is where the story takes a very different turn, though. Kelsey Plum was about to discover why you never mess with a superstar who has nothing to lose and everything to prove if she had assumed Caitlin Clark would just sit quietly and endure this public humiliation. Not only was Clark's response cunning, but it was also deadly. She didn't compose a lengthy, sentimental post. She refrained from holding a press conference. Rather, she opted for the most destructive weapon imaginable. 6 words that exposed Kelsey Plum's hypocrisy and utterly killed her in her comment area. The Instagram comment section went crazy when Clark shared her response. The crowd was yelling. The message was well-liked by other gamers. Even casual basketball watchers were aware of what they had just seen. Clark's takedown was executed with surgical accuracy. With 6 words that pierced more than any long response could, she was able to turn the entire story on its head. This wasn't only a return. This was a psychological warfare masterpiece. The fact that Clark didn't even have to put forth much effort makes this even more tragic. The weather, the confidence, the dismissive energy, and the total lack of concern about what a seasoned player thought of her were all casually mentioned by Clark while Plum was out there making premeditated attacks in news conferences. It was flawless. Kelsey Plum was severely chastised by radio host Colin Cowherd over the circumstance.
Guys were flying before she arrived on one of those airlines that made you pay for a cup of water. One of those airlines that is the planes are the color of a highlighter.
Everyone was focusing on how horribly Plum had misjudged the whole thing. The agreement was swift and harsh. At the wrong moment, Plum had chosen the wrong fight with the wrong person. However, Clark's brutal reaction disclosed something far more significant than simply prevailing in this specific conflict. It demonstrated that no one in this league intimidates her. Veterans who believe they can intimidate the new celebrity have just discovered that Clark possesses the brains, cunning, and courage to retaliate in ways that make them look completely silly. The response from the basketball community was intense. Fans who had previously supported Clark grew even more ardent. It dawned on impartial onlookers that they were witnessing a unique person respond to criticism with devastating efficiency. Even non-fans of women's basketball were discussing Clark's reaction. This is what sets real superstars apart from everyone else. They don't merely react when confronted. Their detractors wish they had never raised their voices in the first place, since they absolutely control the response.
Kelsey Plum made it her business to take a little shot at Caitlin Clark and her team.
Kelsey Plum believed she was using a calculated move to discredit Clark. Rather, she provided Clark with the ideal chance to show why she is, without a doubt, the face of women's basketball. The timing, the humor, the total rejection of Plum's intimidation attempt. Clark's response was perfect in every way. Seeing other seasoned players in the league take notes is even more fulfilling. They just saw what happens when you attempt to humiliate Caitlin Clark in public. She doesn't become combative. She doesn't become sentimental. She exacts revenge. The generational divide in women's basketball was also made clear by Clark's reaction. Players like Plum, who have been working hard for years without receiving attention, are now witnessing a rookie emerge as the biggest star in sports history. That annoyance seems sense, but attacking Clark with it was incredibly foolish. The figures are accurate. More people have heard about the WNBA thanks to Clark than any other athlete in history. The ratings for television are skyrocketing. The arenas are selling out. Products are flying off the shelves.
Two things are clear. If Caitlin Clark plays in the All-Star game, it will set records. But now, because of her popularity, even if she doesn't, it will break records and be the second highest ever.
Additionally, Kelsey Plum made the decision to attack the individual in charge of perhaps raising everyone's pay prospects. The irony is delightful. Plum achieved the exact opposite of what she had planned. Plum was able to offer Clark another chance to demonstrate why she is untouchable in this league, rather than undermining her power or painting her in a negative light. The answer was so well written that it demonstrated Clark's superior intelligence and poise while making Plum appear petty. One thing has become very evident during the entire discussion. Caitlin Clark is more than just a talented basketball player who gained notoriety. She is the whole deal. She possesses talent, intelligence, marketing acumen, and a killer instinct that will destroy anyone who challenges her.
It's not the fever. The fever with Caitlin's evaluation has gone up 273%. The rest of the teams, on average, have risen by 100% or 168%, and all of them at least 100%.
The league is still feeling the fallout from this feud, because they've witnessed what happens when you attempt to take jabs at someone who has the platform, notoriety, and wit to retaliate in ways that make you look foolish. Other players are now paying attention to how they talk about Clark. The most difficult lesson ever was taught to Kelsey Plum. You had better make sure you don't miss the queen. She didn't simply miss either. She set Clark up for the most vicious reaction in WNBA history. The cleverness and timing of Clark's return weren't the only things that made it so beautiful. It was that the power dynamic was totally altered. All of a sudden, Plum was the player who was completely destroyed by a rookie's six-word retort, rather than the seasoned attacker. Caitlin Clark is unique among women's basketball players because of this. She is in charge of the whole story around the game, not just the game itself. Clark constantly demonstrates that she's performing on an entirely new level, whether it's setting records on the court or dealing with detractors off the court.
I think we all understand that there's plenty of jealousy for Caitlin Clark around the WNBA, her spotlight, the endorsements she gets, and her fame. But Kelsey Plum, I could imagine her feeling a type of way because she really had a very similar college career.
A new era has just begun in the WNBA. The days of being able to scare the younger generation of superstars are long gone for veterans. The league as a whole was affected by Clark's response. If you wish to challenge me, be ready for the repercussions. But hold on, the tale becomes even more bizarre. Something unexpected occurred when Clark's heartbreaking answer went viral. The outcomes were startling when other WNBA players began taking sides. A few veterans discreetly removed their social media posts endorsing Plum. Numerous rookies started to appreciate Clark's response. Everyone in the league was keeping an eye on who would support which side. The public assault by Kelsey Plum wasn't impulsive. It was the result of a concerted attempt by some veterans to dehumanize Clark and place her where they believed she belonged in the league hierarchy. However, they greatly misjudged the people they were interacting with. Plum wasn't simply shut down by Clark's 6-word reply. Every veteran who believed they could frighten her as a group received a note. It was an obvious message. How long you've been here doesn't matter to me. Your little clicks don't matter to me, and I won't back down from anyone. When endorsement arrangements became involved, the fallout became much more dramatic. Sponsors started taking action after closely observing the entire conflict. Already, Clark's marketability had skyrocketed. However, the way she handled this scandal made her even more appealing to brands who wanted to work with someone who could deal with criticism and pressure in such a devastating way. In the meantime, Kelsey Plum's chances of receiving endorsements plummeted. Businesses don't want to be linked to players who appear resentful and envious, particularly when they're going after the greatest star in the game. In a few days, the financial consequences of Plum's choice to initiate this conflict became glaringly obvious. The most bizarre aspect of this whole story is what transpired when other sports leagues began to take notice. NBA players started offering their opinions on the matter. NFL players shared Clark's reaction on their narratives. In a manner that women's basketball feuds never do, this WNBA drama was suddenly making its way into the mainstream of sports culture. By using Kelsey Plum's attack as a platform, Clark was able to raise her profile outside of basketball fans. This is the kind of crossover appeal that produces real superstars rather than merely talented athletes who happen to be well-liked. Even after the first exchange, the psychological warfare persisted. Clark showed that all of this controversy was simply fuel for her fire when she started sharing videos of herself working out. She wasn't trying to avoid the controversy. It served as inspiration for her to increase her level of dominance. Conversely, Plum was remarkably silent on social media. Just silence. No more divisive remarks. No strengthening of her stance. The veteran appeared to understand that she had taken on far more than she could handle, despite her initial confidence in confronting Clark. At this point, everyone recognized they were witnessing more than simply a gifted rookie responding to criticism. They were seeing the rise of a player with the mental toughness and strategic acumen to subjugate opponents on and off the court. Unknowingly, Kelsey Plum had made a monster. When Kelsey Plum initiated this altercation, she believed she was using force. Rather, she became a warning about what happens when you undervalue Caitlin Clark's capacity to use every obstacle as a chance to demonstrate her superiority.